I wanted to let you know that we're going to have an important speaker this morning. Jane Sinclair is here. She's part of the docent training class of 2004. And for quite a number of years now, she's been spearheading the docent training overnight, which is coming up really soon. And Jane offered to come and talk to you all about how it goes and answer your questions, because I haven't been on the docent training overnight, and Dave's done it once as a trainee. So we have the expert in the house, lovely Jane, and let's give her a round of applause. Thanks for coming.
Before I, to get my enthusiasm up. This is to me, one of the most special things you're going to do. This will bond you together. You'll have so much fun. I have to encourage everybody to come. And the other thing that I love about it is you're going to see two of the facilities that we have. Cypress Grove, which is always research-oriented. It's right on Tomales Bay. It is always beautiful, be it raining or be it like a day like today. It is the most special place. And you'll really get an understanding, especially, we've got birds today, and they study birds like crazy. And they do it even all over the world. They've helped people in what is it, Nigeria or Nicaragua, somewhere. Anyway. Am I awake? I think I need more coffee. But we're going there first, and we're going to work out the details this afternoon. We may meet here first and start the day like this, and then head in a convoy out to Cypress Grove. You're going to love it. It's just stunning. I would encourage you to carpool, because we don't have the parking at each facility that we have here. So if you can get a group together, that would be really helpful. And then from there, we go to Martin Griffin Preserve, which you're going to love. We'll have a campfire if the fire marshals decide. Hopefully we get some rain before then. Then there won't be a problem. But we'll try and have a campfire outside. We'll have some of the kits set up in the dining room there so that you can walk around. What did you call it, Julia? Cocktails and...
Kits and cocktails, but it's really wine. But kits and wine doesn't sound as good.
Kits and cocktails. So we'll do that. You will bring your lunch for the first day, and we'll have a sign up for you you'll supply the dinner. We, the docents, will supply breakfast for you the next day. Yeah, we always do. And let's see, and around the campfire, we want to encourage you, because you're going to be going into classrooms, to participate. We'll have some singing, but if you want to do a skit, if you know a great Native American story that you could tell, I like to always tell stories. And I think the kids always enjoy that. So I would encourage you to think about that, something you might, but you don't have to. I mean, it's up to you. But we'll, it'll just be divine. The bookstore's down there at Martin Griffin. And you can get a discount if you want a hat. They have the newer style now with the new logo. And just lots of neat things to look at. We'll do that when we first get there, go to the bookstore and all. And then you'll have, you can have a short hike that afternoon, but then the next day you'll have a major hike. So you can really see that property and appreciate its beauty. There's all kinds of, so many neat little things. Like many years ago, all the volunteers went there, and there was a big oil spill in Bay, and so they all went up there, and that's where they took care of the birds. So there's one by the house that's there. there's one, what would you call it, mosaic with all these hands to remember that and how they saved so many. It's just glorious, what can I say? So that kind of gives you an overview, I think, of what we have intended to do, but I think it's important that I answer any questions you have. Yes?
Are we camping? So bring a tent, that kind of thing, or what?
You can, and there's a lovely lawn, and there's like fruit trees and all, so you can bring a tent, but there's also 2 big bunkhouses, and they're filled with what am I trying to say? Yes, bunk beds, thank you. I had a meeting last night too, I'm sorry, I just... anyway, you need to bring a sleeping bag, and toothbrush, things like that. There's running water, there's 2 little bathrooms, right? There's like a bunkhouse here and 1 bathroom, and then adjacent to it is another bathroom, and then there's another bunkhouse. So with a class of, I think you're 34, you should be fine with somewhere to sleep. What else?
What time does it start on the 25th, on that Wednesday?
Well, we're going to work that out, so we'll tell you. We're changing things just a little bit. Things happen, we have to share part of Cypress Grove with somebody else. So we'll come up with that this afternoon, and then Dave will let you know. Yes?
What time do we get back in 26, so I can do some scheduling?
Usually you're out of there around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you have work or something that you have to go early, then I suggest you find somebody else to carpool with that wants to meet that schedule. I would encourage you to take the long hike though. You just really get to see that property, and it's so beautiful. But what we've done in the past, and we'll talk about this, is if there's people who really have to leave early, I realize you're used to just Wednesday. Maybe we can work out just an early morning birding experience and go to the lagoon for those people. We'll talk about it this afternoon. So feel free, let us know if you need to get back early. We want to accommodate you, but we really want to encourage you to stay overnight because, I don't know, it just draws you all together. And anytime somebody misses, like this fellow, during his class, you really feel left out when you get back because it's just so much fun and it's so exciting.
Joe Mueller is our guest instructor for the day. He teaches here almost as much, I think, as he teaches for ACR, almost as much as he teaches for his real job. He's been one of the lead science instructors at College of Marin for more than 25 years. And he also, remember last week, we had David Herlocker here, a winner of the Terwilliger Award. Winner of the Terwilliger Award here. And Joe is committed not just to good science education inside, but to relevant science education that connects concepts with what's actually going on in the real world. He leads field trips to beautiful places and teaches people about the natural history there. And he's super interested in the interconnections between living things that we see and can't see. He taught a whole advanced docent training class for us on mutualism. And mutualism was one of the things I asked you about on that evaluation. Remember that evaluation that 32 out of 34 of you filled out? I'm so grateful. And I want to say something about the evaluation, but I want to finish introducing Joe first. While he's queuing up his presentation. In addition to teaching and leading trips, and he has a kind of a menagerie out in West Marin with some animal friends, He has served on the Ottawa Canyon Ranch Board of Directors for a number of years, and we're really lucky to have him here today. He is an excellent instructor in the field and out of the field. I want to tell you that the decision to switch the field portion to the morning and the lecture portion to the afternoon, that was my call. I just talked to the person who's teaching the class. He would prefer not to do that. Educationally, the flow doesn't work that way. So here are some implications. We're going to be in here now. I mean, you got to teach the class you want to teach. Do you agree with me? Yeah. So that was my bad.
I have big lecture halls I have to talk in now. They don't make them the way they used to when they were up, you know, when acoustically they make them flat, so I'm constantly yelling all the day. Let me know. Just do that, okay? And I'll be attentive to that. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is a difficult call. I probably really should ask you about the call as far as, you know, comfort and the heat. And if your first priority is the educational experience, I'd recommend doing this first, because then we have stuff and conceptual things to work with when we're out there. If we go out there first, I really don't have a sense of who you are or who I am, and we're just out there, there's a bird. It's blue! Kind of thing, you know, but it's not as much. So that's why I thought it might be better, but I certainly understand, and that is not at all her bad. That's my bad for not getting back to her and letting her know that. So I take full responsibility for that. Sorry about that. It's been busy, crazy at school. So my name's Joe. And could I have how many of you consider yourself birders? Yeah. Okay. So birders have a bird book. You know, they can look at a birder usually doesn't have to go thumb through the whole thing to be able to find a crow. They kind of know where it is. How many people can do that? Find the crow or bird. Okay, come on. There's more birders here than I thought. I know the sparrows and the finches are at the end somewhere, and the ducks are in the beginning somewhere. Ornithologists call this phylogeny, right? The kind of evolutionary order of birds, which has been changing quite a bit. So I'd like to share a little bit what I thought I would do. This is, you know, to me, in my mind, this is ornithology class in an hour kind of a thing, right? The 16-week course, what's the best stuff that I can pull out there to bring the biology of birds, to bring up our passion in the biology of birds. And I think that's really where it all is at. What we're really doing with the kids, and you have adults too you work with, I'm sure, with everybody. I'm going to say the kids because you're working with the kids and the adults when it's the adults, right? Yeah. Is sharing your passion. And so one of my objectives today is to you know, either add fuel to that, or kindle it, or spark it, or in some way share with you what I've seen in understanding the biology of birds. Pull out those areas that would be most useful for you, and then at the end talk a little bit about kind of how to see birds in the field in a way that might be more useful just from the eyes of somebody who's been looking at it for decades. And remember really, I'm going to end with this, it's really all about perspective. It's developing your perspective and sharing that with the others, right? Because we all have a different way of looking at things. I just said, you know, crows in a book, and we all kind of, you know, thought about how that was kind of funny, right? What is that? That's part of our perspective. And if you ever talk with people that are never out there in nature, they have a very different perspective than those of us that spend time out there. And those of us that are professionals that are out there are taking our perspective and sharing that with others. That's the most important part. The details and things are going to go in and out. It's kind of like you're showing them the fish rather than giving them a fish, right? And so that's what we're trying to do here. Yeah. Okay. So all I got to do is kind of turn this towards me here. Amazing world of birds, ornithology in an hour kind of a thing. And these are the typical topics. I'm not going to discuss all of these. But, you know, as you probably already know, birds are the only creatures on the planet that have feathers. They also, of course, all of them have feathers. There are many different types. We'll talk about that. We won't get into flight dynamics that much. Maybe when we're out in the field Physiology is something that's very interesting because it allows the birds to fly, of course, their biology that allows them to fly. How is it that they're able to get enough oxygen? How are they able to, how is a Cooper's hawk able to move at 45, 50 miles per hour in a forest without hitting a tree? How is it able to do that? It's really out of our reality. We can't even get close to that, right? Also, of course, their brain, how are they perceiving the world? Turns out we were wrong about that. All the way up to about the mid-90s, we were completely wrong. We had to do scientists had to do a complete 180 on understanding the brains of birds. We'll keep talking about that a little bit, their intelligence. I think vocalizations is a big part of experiencing birds, and we'll talk a little bit about how they're very different. And I like to compare birds to mammals, because we're mammals, we know how we are, we know how it is that we're able to get around. And when it comes to comparing mammals to birds, it's rather embarrassing, because it turns out their physiology and their anatomy is so much better adapted for survival, and that's why you see them all over the world. That's why there are birds that are nesting in Antarctic, that's why there are birds in the deepest part of the ocean, that's where there are birds in the highest mountains, places that mammals could never live. And of course they're able to move around a lot easier, right? So they're pretty incredible, and they have all kinds of wonderful cycles. They're just beginning to put the boat in the water and understanding how they can migrate so precisely, and we'll talk a little bit about that, their navigation systems. So that's mostly what we're talking about today. And when you think about birds, and when you're sharing that with birds, always kind of think, when you're working with kids, I think is, where is your awe? I'm sure we've all sat there and just watched a bird and just go, whoa, how do they do that? It really is quite amazing. And most of the stuff they do, we can't even do with our machines. We're very clumsy, even using our neocortex and technology. It's quite amazing. So they really are, I think they really are beyond the science in the sense that there's a spiritual value to birds as well. And if you look on that side of the human condition, you'll see that all over our history as far as our connection with birds as well. So I don't know if you've ever seen a frigate bird, but they're really, really probably one of the most amazing flyers. And they have to be better than all the other flyers because they steal from them. That's one of the things about being a thief. You've got to be a little faster and better figuring out how to get that. And so, always, I think when you're out there with them, always try and bring yourself back to that time of awe. Have that come out when you're teaching, right? You want to kind of share that. That's the perspective that you want to try and bring up. Think about that amazing bird experience that you had and emulate that as you're sharing. That would be my first recommendation, beyond the bird biology, but being out there with birds, because that's what's going to infect your kids. You're giving them a little bird virus kind of a thing, right? And once they have it, they'll keep it for the rest of their lives. And you'll be able to do that a lot better by sharing your passion rather than just saying, well, this is plant and that is plant, and now let's go in. Right? Yeah, so please keep that in mind. So let's get an example. Let's look at a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcons have been found around here. Probably also a good area, I'm sure, for prairie falcons as well. These are exceptionally fast birds. They're birds that are faster than our reality, and they're well adapted to it. We know how it is to move on the highway at about 60, maybe 70 miles per hour, but think about doubling that plus. And being able to accurately use your brain to be able to figure out when that duck that's going at about 100 miles per hour is going to be at just the right place so that you can smack it with your talons and hit it, and by the time it's rolling down, you'll be able to come back and grab it before it even hits the ground. This is just amazing stuff. It's out of my reality. All right? In fact, it took many years, it took decades for biologists to be able to figure out how fast they're going, because they go so fast, so you'll see different numbers out there. I've seen anything from 90 to 220. So that's why I'm putting out 180. That's a good medium, right? Because it's really difficult. They're fast. They're so fast. It's a difficult thing to time. And so let's use the peregrine falcon idea right now with that sense of awe to enter into the biological world. What is it that biologists see that's special about birds? And we'll kind of go through each one of these, and I'll give you some examples. It's kind of what we'll be doing. You poor people over there, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be dancing all day. I don't know where. So they're amazingly light, yet strong. They're just as strong as any mammal body, but they're a lot lighter. How do they do that? That's one of the things we'll be talking about. They have to have a very high metabolic rate. And that, of course, is needed for flight. And that's a great advantage to be able to be a predator as well. If you're on high, then you're likely to be faster than your prey. And of course, that's a big part of it, because a lot of birds have to go after other animals, insects, rodents, other birds, to be able to get the nutrition that they need. You don't see a lot of leaf-eating birds. You don't see a lot of birds that are out there just grazing on grass, right? There are some that are able to do that, but these are birds that just kind of just stay in trees and barely fly. Right? So flight takes a very special metabolic system, and that's all about burning sugar in a very efficient way to be able to get to do what you need to do. They are the most amazing on the planet that can do that. If you wanted to have a visual in the human world, it would be like those old locomotives that you see in the movies where they have and they're just putting in coal as fast as they can. That's a bird metabolic rate. That's just constant. And watch birds and compare them to mammals, right? They're always moving around. Especially the little ones, right? You know, watch a mammal, right? You can really see that in their metabolic rates, and of course that has a lot to do with flight and survival. And remember, biologists are all trained mostly about trying to see the evolutionary significance, because it's evolution that binds all biology together, and so you'll see a lot of that leaking out of this. That's a big part of our understanding. Of course, you have to have a highly developed nervous system. Their nervous systems are, in many instances, far more developed than ours. It depends on what you look at. Now, we tend to try and look at things as being, superior to all living things, and we certainly do have a well-developed neocortex. But when it comes to medulla and when it comes to coordination, we don't even come close to birds. When it comes to vision, when it comes to hearing, when it comes to all kinds of senses that are needed for flight, we don't even come close. And I think this is a really important point to get out to younger people today, that we have to see ourselves as part of the world rather than something that's on top of the world. And in my opinion, that's the #1 thing we should be doing in a situation like this, and using nature as a conduit for that. And I'll give you more examples of that. That's kind of the underlying theme of this talk. Embarrassed to be a mammal. Birds are incredible. Yeah. And so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying take human beings and demote us down into whatever that dirty nature part is, but to take nature and bring it up with us so that we're all in one area. That's something we need to do in our heads, I think, as an environmental scientist, and taking a look at all this. The highly refined senses as well. So we'll talk about these senses. Their eyes blow ours away. I mean, I can't understand how a golden eagle could see a rat a mile away, things like that. It's quite amazing. So we'll talk a little bit about how they're able to do that, just enough to where we can move on, and so it makes sense so that it kind of sticks in there. A big part of today is putting ornithological drawers into your head so that there's areas to put stuff in the future, right? So let's take a look at their skeleton. It turns out that they have all the same bones that you have, but many of them are reduced in number and fused with others. And so if you think about that, that's a great way to make things strong, and it's a great way to make things strong, and it's a great way to make things light. So for instance, something we'll be talking about, we'll see that the pelvis of a bird is fused to the vertebrae. In fact, all of the vertebrae are fused in a bird except for the cervical vertebrae. Right? And so we see that the same thing with the legs. When you look at a leg of a bird and you see, if you see a flamingo, it looks like a knee here, that's actually the ankle. You can't see a bird's knee unless you had a bird in your hand and you fluffed up the feathers way up and you looked way up in there. It's in an area you can't see. So these are all actually metatarsal bones, the bones from your foot and the lower bones from your leg, they're all fused into one. So it's very strong, but it's very narrow and light. And so the whole skeletal system is developed this way, where it's fused and reduced. So you can see every little bone and find that in a mammal. Now think about this, we probably all eat a chicken drumstick. So when you eat a chicken drumstick, right, that's the lower part of the foot there, right? There's a little splinter bone in there, isn't it? Well, that's analogous to your fibia, your little bone, but it's almost all gone. Right? It's what biologists call vestigial structure. It doesn't have much use, but it's left over. It shows that in its evolutionary past it was there at one time, but it isn't bad enough for it to be evolutionarily purged. Okay? So those are some of the things you think about. And you all know, of course, we all know that birds have bones that are hollow, but not a lot of people know that there are struts They're just like the struts that are here to strengthen the roof. If you look at the design of the struts that are between that brace there, you'll see the same kind of design here. And so we have those in bird bones. So not only are they hollow, they're also engineered just perfectly so that they're extremely strong. They're just as strong as a very thick, heavy mammal bone, but they're light enough to allow flight. All those vertebrae are fused, so you can see all along here, this is fused with the lower part of the thorax. Yeah. And there's the synsacrum. Again, that's the pelvic bone. You know what your pelvic bone is. Just take that, lengthen it, and fuse it to your lower vertebrae, and you've got yourself a synsacrum. You've probably seen that if you eat. If you have a lot of brothers and sisters, and there's only one chicken, you probably had to eat that Hungry enough. Yeah. So this is just some examples. We could probably just spend the whole hour just talking about wonderful adaptations that birds have in their skeletal region. As a matter of fact, in our ornithology class we do. We spend a whole night on that. So there's a lot more to it. There's really a lot of stuff going on there. The ribs are very thin and very light, but they're all connected to each other. So they all help each other be strong. It's really quite amazing. And these little things that you can see here, the uncinate processes. Yeah. Okay, so on to metabolic then. So that's anatomical and a bit of physiology there. But let's talk about the respiratory system. So if you're going to be a good flyer, you've got to make sure to get oxygen to the cells extremely efficiently and be able to dump that carbon dioxide out. You're doing it right now. You have sugars that you've taken in from your food, and you're bringing in oxygen, and you're burning those sugars for energy, and then you're releasing carbon dioxide. Well, this is called the cellular respiration. They do this a lot more efficiently than we do. About 30 times more efficiently. They're amazing at being able to burn fuel, far beyond what mammals can do. And to be able to do that, you need a lot of oxygen. And so it turns out that their percentage of oxygen extraction from a breath of air is 98.5%. Almost 100%. Ours is a measly 30 if we're in shape. Yeah. And that's because, again, we're mammals. And so if you look at the design, it's actually a flow-through system. These are all air sacs. Air goes into the posterior ones in the inhale, and then through the lungs on an exhale, and then the next inhale brings it to the anterior air sacs, and then the second exhale is out. So they have 4 breaths for our tube. It's flow-through. Ours is a cul-de-sac. It's just like going into a city and really appreciating two-way streets, right? Like that, rather than just going into a cul-de-sac and to get something to go out and then go back. Mammals are that. They're cul-de-sac systems. They're not very efficient. And so, I probably don't want all the details on this, but you can see again, first inhalation are the sacs on the other side. Then it goes with an exhalation through the lungs, not just moving in there and hoping you're getting a little bit of oxygen within the little grates that we have at the bottom, kind of a situation. Then a second expiration in here, and then out. So they have 4 breaths for every two, and it's flow through. And so they're able to maximize their extraction of oxygen. Completely different, not even comparative to mammals. And no mammals come even close to this. So birds are evolutionarily designed to be able to extract oxygen a lot more efficiently than mammals. And if you're interested in seeing the details there, I can compare. You can see that this is a flow-through system. There's blood, there's air, and it's able to be diffused into blood to be able to then be circulated throughout the body. Of course, they have a lot bigger hearts. Their hearts are about 3 times bigger per comparatively body than it is for a comparative mammal. So, a little bird's about this big, same size of a mouse will have a heart considerably larger than a mouse. Yeah, there's ours. I put this because it kind of makes me feel like this when I feel a little goofy compared to a bird. But ours comes in like this, and it just kind of moves around a little bit, and then we breathe it out. The problem is, and one of the main reasons it's so inefficient, is because the old air mixes with the new air, and it doesn't move all out. You don't have a flow-through system. But we don't need one. We're mammals, right? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about feathers. Feathers are really cool. You'll all probably be able to find feathers out there when you're working with your kids. There are quite a few different types, but just to kind of get the general idea of a feather, they're made up of this, the rachis, or the shaft that moves through. Not down feathers, I'll show you this in a minute. They don't have that. That's one of the main reasons they're so different here. But they have these really cool barbs and barbules, and then on the barbules here, they have like a Velcro kind of a system where they have little microscopic hooks, and then on the inside of that, they have little phalanges. So you can zip up a feather. I bet you've done that. Have you ever found a feather that's been kind of crumply, go, oh, this is really beautiful, and you just kind of work with it a little bit and all comes back? Well, of course, birds do that every day. It's called preening. And they spend about 15% of their time, depending on the bird, some up to 30% if they're an aquatic bird, preening, making sure that their feathers are just right. They're constantly just zipping them up with oil from a gland that's at the upper base of their tail, called a uropygial or preen gland. So they're taking that and wiping. It's the only gland birds have. Very different than mammals. Mammals have a whole bunch of, we've got a bunch of different kinds of glands, about 8 different kinds of glands. They only have one. And so that makes them quite different too. Okay, so this is all in a zip up. So what happens if you didn't have these hooks and hamuli, the little flanges that are underneath? Well, then it would be fuzzy, right? It wouldn't be all kept together. So that's the difference. Let's take a look. All right, so this is a feather that has the little hooks and flanges, and this is a feather that doesn't. Okay, and so that's the difference between them, and so they're amazingly strong and light. There isn't anything in nature that is as strong and light. Have you ever tried to just destroy a feather with your hands? It's really hard. Try and break it apart, or maybe you probably haven't done that, because who hates a feather? They're beautiful, but take this out on a feather. Maybe you're mad at your chickens or something. I get out and chase them around. If I have a feather left over, I just turn. Right? You really can't do much to it. It just kind of stays there. Yeah. And so some feathers that are used for flight, and these of course are very firm, and these contour feathers are actually amazingly the same shape as the wings. They're the same shape as the wings. Now, the way flight works, when you kind of think about one of those wings that are out there, is that air takes a longer distance to get above than below, so it creates vacuum, right? And so that goes against the gravitational force, and that produces what we call lift, right? Like an airplane. But amazingly, when they flap, the primaries are the same shape as the wings, but they're going this way. And so when air moves across them this way, that produces the forward thrust. So it's all about shape and moving air through it. They're really quite amazing. And so these feathers are shaped in that way to where they have what we call camber. I'm not familiar with that term. It's the same kind of shape of a cross-section of a plane wing. Yeah. So those are shaped that way. They're used for flight, and they're very durable. Imagine when they're flying for sometimes 4,000 to 10,000 miles or 20,000 miles. Imagine how much wear and tear on those feathers. They don't stop and then grow a new set of feathers in between. It's really quite an amazing thing. And birds that live in forests, they're always knocking them up against leaves and trees and all kinds of stuff. So feathers are durable, feathers are replaceable, and feathers also are the best insulators. We all know that because down is really incredible. And so down here is, again, like a semi-plume that doesn't have the little hooks and the little hamuli, the little flanges, but it also doesn't have a shaft. So it can then lay down really neatly and trap air in there. And so as the bird metabolizes, and just the same way as you and I, they form heat by the friction of muscle. Internal, your muscles are all vibrating, and that's what's forming heat. And then your arterial blood brings that out to the body, and we keep it in with clothes, right? Well, they keep it in with feathers, and they're way better at that. And so you can have things like penguins that are in ice water moving around. Now, water conducts heat out even more. No, feathers are amazing, especially when you're thinking about birds like penguins and some of the birds that live in the Arctic, and they're just not cold at all, right? Or eider ducks. Eider ducks die in ice water. It's ice water. It's incredible. Okay? And then some of them are used. You've all been on a plane and you looked out at the wings and they've got all those little sensors that are hanging out there so they can kind of read. I don't know what they're doing. They're reading the air of some sort, aren't they? I hope they are. I hope they're aware of what's coming up. right? Well, birds are too. They have these little phyllo plumes, aren't those cool? And they stick out in certain little areas, and they read the wind, and they read the currents, and they read the pressure, and that tells the bird's brain what's going on. Well, probably I'm going to have to go down a little bit, or probably I'm going to have to go up a little bit, or maybe I'm going to have to go land. Storms coming in. So they have all those little sensors. They're specialized feathers. A lot of people don't know about these. And if you look closely at a nighthawk or a hornbill or any other bird, most other birds that catch insects while they're flying, catch them on the wing like a flycatcher, right? The little phoebe comes out, right? Grabs an insect and comes back, that's little flycatchers. You notice they have like little hairs that are on the edge of their bill. And now there's been a lot of argument over the past few years as to what they're for, because it turned out that we were wrong. We thought that they were funnels to increase the size, to be able to funnel the insects in, but it turns out for many of them, they are sensory, or they're used to filter out the dust that comes from a moth. Have you ever caught a moth on those dust? Imagine if you're doing that all night, it's going to get in your eyes. And so when they grab the moths, it picks up all that dust. That's what they were trying. So anyway, those are called brittle bristles here. And so you can see bristle feathers right here. So they do have some feathers that act kind of like hairs as well, and they look like hair. But no birds have hair. Not a one. Not a one. And all birds have feathers. And when you compare birds, generally, they are, because of flight, constrained. Think about the difference between the smallest bird and the largest bird, an ostrich and a little bee hummingbird, right? That's really actually not that big of a difference compared to a shrew, a little kitten, hognose bats, now the smallest mammal within Thailand, about this big, and a blue whale. Right? The mammals aren't constrained as much, so they have a lot more ability to have variations in their morphology. We don't see this as much in birds. Okay, so we could talk a lot about feathers here, but that's some of the main, some of the main idea between the different feathers. And a little bit about their colors. This is something that you don't see in other organisms, except maybe insects and some plants and very few mammals, and that's structural colors. And structural colors really depends on the viewer's viewpoint. It's all about physical perspective, right? And so I thought I'd just show you a little bit about that. So you all know that when have you ever looked at our common Anna's hummingbird around here, and you look at it and say, where'd that gorget go? I can't tell what kind of bird. Is that a male or a female? I don't see any red. And then it turns and you're all, whoa. It's really bright red. Yeah, and so it's all about bending of light and perspective, right? And so that's how we see that gorget, that little hostess hummingbird. It's a gorgeous gorget, right? And it's all about refracting light and then bending it. So they have little microscopic prisms in their feathers. And as light comes through, it bends. And that's why we only see that. We have to be able to see this here. You have to be in a certain position. If you're over here, you won't be able to see it because it has to move through the prism. So it's pretty incredible how they're able to use that. And this is probably more than we want to get into here, but some of the light is being refracted and some of it's being reflected. And so that all mixes to what we see as blue in blue birds. So this shows the molecular makeup of the feather. We can see that most of the molecular makeup is absorbing most of the rainbow. This is different. This is different cell phone levels of. I'm sorry. Different wavelengths here. But this one is what's coming to our eyes, and it's the same reason the sky's blue. Because as light comes in from the sun, visible light, it turns out that all the colors are scattered, but the blue is what's reflected. The same reason you see a blue in a glacier. You ever seen that incredible blue in glacial ice? The same reason that they're blue. It's called Tyndall scattering. Scattering of the blue, because the molecules are the same size as that part of the light spectrum, right? But if you're looking at the sun when it's going down, there's larger particles lower in the atmosphere, so that is then going to have an effect on all of the red light and the orange part of the spectrum, not the blue. So we see the gorgeous orange sunsets, right? So it's all about scattering different forms of light that come from the rainbow. Kind of cool. A little bit about their eyes. Again, way beyond our imagination. And their eyes are built completely differently in every single aspect. From the external around the eye, to the internal workings of the eye, to the nervous, to the way in which the retina is connected to the nervous part, and even the visual parts of the brain is very different. So it's a whole different wiring system for their vision, which allows them to do incredible things. And this is, again, one of those things we could spend easily talking about. So I kind of picked out just a few things here, just to kind of, get us kind of thinking about it. First of all, they're very large. All birds have huge eyes. And when I'm on field trips with my students, we're like up in Alaska, we always find little roadkills and things like this, and we dissect these birds. Students are always amazed when they look at them. Whoa, I had no idea. Because you just see a little part of that eye, but if you start cutting the skin open and pulling it apart, it's actually this giant eye behind all of that. It really is huge. A great horned owl, right? Those guys, you've heard those guys, right? Great horned owls, that's the male territorial owl. They're about this big. Their eye is the same size as your eye, and they're a lot smaller. So just to give you perspective, the eyes are incredibly large to be able to gather light, and they have all kinds of other stuff that's in there to assure visual acuity, so that they can see things a lot sharper, a lot better. They can see movement a lot better than us, and they gather light at night pretty well too. We actually gather light well. Believe it or not, we gather light at night really well too, but we would never know it because we can't do it if we have a flashlight on. Right? But if you turn that flashlight off for about an hour or two, your pupils will open up so wide that you'll be able to see the shadow of a rat walking across a trail just like an owl can. Of course, we don't usually do that. Has anybody ever gotten, it always amazes me, you get up in the middle of the night when you're camping, right, and you don't have a flashlight, you just get up and you look at the stars, and where did all those stars come from? Because you can now take in, gives 5 million, quadrillion more stars than you can see than if you had a flashlight on. Yeah? So anyway, they can gather light, and so can we. Look at this. Look at all of that space donated for eyes. And I'm using owls just because they're easier to find skulls like this to show this, because they're. But this isn't all birds. All birds have giant eyes, and I took out all the details of their eyes, but their eyes are tubular, they're kind of cone-shaped, and they have a lot broader flat retina, so the back part, the kind of film, the film. I can say film in this class. When I say film in my class at school, they're all, film, what's film? I just tell them something really expensive. Remember that? Every shot was like, okay, I better get this one. That's like $5. Anyway, so this bird can see a rat. We know this. Can see a rat a mile away. Have you ever been driving and it says a mile to what town, and then you can sense it? I can kind of see the town, right? Yeah. So they can see a rat a mile away, and you can barely see a town a mile away. Isn't that amazing? And they can see it well enough to be able to know where it's going and capture it, hunt it. These are amazing things. And this is, I think, one of the main ideas that we can get from that kind of we're on top of everything to we really are a part of everything by bringing out the best in nature when we're out there with them, Did you know that they can do this, they can do that, they can do this, and we can't even think about doing that. So I don't know if you want to go through all this, but just, a mile away, 2 to 5 times more cones. So all of the little pixelating-like structures that are in our retina, there are more of them packed in there, and they have a 1-to-1 ratio with the neurons that are going to the brain. We have like a 2 to 3 to 1, right? So the whole, whoa, wrong one. The back of the eye is flatter, and so there's a wider area in focus. When we're looking, if we look at something, we have to kind of focus in on this little area, and we have these little fovea, which actually aren't even much. They're about like this, but theirs are like this, and they have 2 of them. And so when you are able to look at something, let's just say across the room here, and zero in on something, I'm looking at that picture, I'm zeroing in on it, raptors can do that in 2 areas. Out of my reality. Yeah. They're finding these incredible things out now, being able to use MRIs and all of this technology that they have. Did you know that they now know that when a barn owl is up on, let's say, about a goalpost of a football field, and we blindfold it, and we study how far it can hear, and it's able to hear well enough to be able to get a mouse in complete darkness 100 meters away. It turns out that the wiring of the sound is actually placed on the vision part of the brain, so they actually see the sound. So the little mouse is actually a red flag down there moving, and that's how they could easily be able to touch it. We just figured this out in like 5-7 years. Yeah, so we're finding that the wiring on the brain senses is beyond what we even think, because we don't have that. And so there's so much out there to be able to think about. Yeah, we also noticed that moles, the little star-nosed moles, the ones like that, they have that also. They tactile, that actually is placed on their vision, so they actually see what they touch. Yeah. So I don't know if you're interested in all these details here, but you know, this just gives us some reasons here in understanding how golden eagle can see a mile away. We don't have this, we don't need this, we are primates, we are really good at being able to judge close distances. That's how our eyes evolve, because our eyes evolve in arboreal situations and trees, and so we're really good at judging things, and that's why you have gymnastics and all that, right? We're good at that. Compare that to other mammals, not so much. And so you can see the evolutionary background in all animals, including ourselves.
Joe,
yes?
what does this perceive polarized and UV light?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I just kind of flipped through that. Yeah. So they can see other parts of the spectrum. Let me give you an example. So light is just one part of the whole spectrum. The higher end is like UV, the lower end is heat, right? And so it turns out that there are some birds that can see UV light. And it turns out that UV light will reflect off of urine. So when you see those kestrels that are sitting on the same place, looking down in the same place, you're wondering, how do they know a mouse has been there? Because when mice move, they pee here and there. And so they can see the sun's UV light reflect off of the urine. Yeah. And we're finding this with more and more birds. The first ones that we found this with was the Eurasian kestrel. Now we know that it's in this one. I bet you anything it's in a Velociraptor. So, but it's expensive to figure all this stuff out. So, you know, scientists usually say, okay, it could be found in one bird, it's probably in the others. Let's move on to something. Yeah, unless I can get grant money or something like that. Yeah. So great question. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, rattlesnakes can actually see on the other side of the spectrum. They can actually see heat. And they have these little pits so they can see. So, you know, we're kind of stuck in the visible light spectrum, but other animals can see in the other parts of that. And then polarized light, especially for this works really well for birds that have to deal with refraction from light moving through water, so they can judge distances because they're in the air. And that, well, you know, if you put a pencil into a tank, the pencil's going to be down here when you're looking through the water, right? And so the light changes the way it moves through water than it does air. Well, they have polarized, so they make up for that. So that means an osprey doesn't have to kind of think, okay, let's see, the fish is over there, I'm coming down here, I better judge a foot ahead because I know it's going to be in water. It's already, they actually see it that way because it's already set up the polarization in their eyes. That makes sense? Yeah. Same thing with bald eagles. Bald eagles hunt in water too. Yeah. Or kingfishers. Really quick about their brain, it turns out that the bird brain is a complete different view than what we thought. If we kind of think about stereotypic or what we call instinctual, that would be the purple, and the green would be what we think about as thinking, as the kind of human, you know, when we think about human kind of working things out. Cognition, all of that, I'm sure you're familiar with. Well, this is what we thought. We thought they were all a bunch of bird brains, that was everything was stereotypical and they had a little bit of learning. And of course, there's us. This hasn't changed too much, right? But we have this instinctual part at the base of our brain. The brain involved like onions. It has layers, right? And when that primeval stuff comes up on us, that's when we get in trouble, right? Yeah. There are all kinds of flaws for that. And then also, this is the coordinating center. This is the cerebellum. Look at the size difference for this small brain. It's almost the same size as the rest of the brain. Ours is maybe the size of a walnut at the base of the brain. And we're still pretty good at coordinating, but they can coordinate way better. Here's the modern view. Look at that. Look at all the green. They're actually thinking about all this stuff. We thought they were just all stereotypic. And it turns out, science is only as good as the questions it asks. So once we started seeing this, then we started thinking, oh, maybe they're smarter, why don't we test for this? And then we're all, ooh, what? They're way smarter than we thought. Do they have chickens? Are they smarter than you thought? I mean, it's just, sometimes they blow your mind. You're like, whoa, how'd you figure that out? I thought you were really dumb. They have 25 different vocalizations. They can tell each other when there's a predator in the air or one on the ground where it's coming. I mean, they're talking to each other, but most of us are just kind of thinking they're squawking and things, but they have a whole communication system going on. That's what chickens. Yeah. So all kinds of examples out here. I'll give you one. Here's one example that's incredible. Clark's Nutcracker. These are related to the jays that we have here. Jays have great spatial memories as well. But the Clark's Nutcracker has with that. They can hide between 22,000 and 33,000 pine seeds and 2,000 unique caches and remember where they were. I can't remember one. My kids. All right? And they can remember for about 9 months, which is about as long as they need to remember. And of course, they're mutualistic with the pine trees that they live in the higher areas. The trees can't really reproduce without them forgetting some of them. And they studied this. It was interesting. They studied this in a gym where they had all these areas, and then they had nutcrackers living there, and they were able to put all of these. And then if you just went and they had like a little can or something that they hit it, and you took the rock and a stick and moved it a little bit, they would never be able to find it. So they have spatial memories. They know where things are according to how they're arranged. Far beyond ours. Far beyond us. And again, this is another thing that's out of my reality. Imagine 22,000 different things remembering. So these guys are doing the same thing, but they're doing it with like hundreds. So when you see a jay, you can share that. These jays take these acorns and they plant them for the oaks. The oaks are making the acorns for jays and for other creatures to hopefully that they'll go plant them and then forget a few. All right? It's a great example of mutualism. Yeah.
They don't plant them all around here all over the place.
Yeah. All over the place. And they remember. They're in the trees, they're in a cranny, and they also, did you hear this? This is recent stuff. They purposely trick other birds. They'll go towards a bird when they know it's watching them, and then pretend to put something in there. And take another thing, and go just like what we do. Like, no, it's over here. There it is. Idiot. And then go hide it somewhere else. All this stuff. Again, you know, we're asking these questions. We're seeing these amazing things that are happening. And again, we don't have time to get into this so much, but just the point of how smart they are, I highly recommend, if you haven't ever done this, to Google Alex the parrot and spend some time. Just take a half hour, 15 minutes of your time and Google Alex the parrot and just watch him. Just watch what he can do. He is incredible. Vocabulary of 150. He can articulate bigger, smaller, same, different. He's got a whole personality. He knows certain people. There's also a book called Owl to Me by Pepperdine. I don't know if you read that. Incredible book. It's just, I get goosebumps when I think about it. I mean, we just don't give these animals the break that they really deserve. Again, I think it's that big, we're kind of trained to kind of think that we're above everything and how could anything, you know, be able to do this like that, like he does. So he was kind of a, you know, quote, Einstein of the parrot, but I just, you know, all of that intelligence is out there with those birds that we don't really kind of give them that break. So vocalizations are another incredible thing. They don't have a larynx up here like us. They have a syrinx that's down in the bronchi where it branches. So they actually they can make two sounds at the same time. Songbirds are incredible, right? So it's located much deeper in the bird's body than our larynx is, right? And it's a double instrument. It's like a double flute. And it has a bunch of membranes that have different muscles that are attached. And the most amazing thing about it is that it's independently innervated in the brain. So they can literally sing two songs at once. And those songs resonate and do all that stuff that musicians talk about that I don't know much about. What's the opposite of resonate? Where they hamper each other.
Dissonance.
What's that?
Dissonance.
Dissonance? Yeah, that's another word I'm thinking of. That probably is right, but not the word I'm thinking about. But yeah, anyway. So, you know, waves working out what they do. Sing two different notes at the same time, sing a duet with itself. And so it's very likely that birds are hearing different things than what we hear. And and there's a lot more information in songs. And as you know, song is all about, well, not all about, but mostly about two things. When it's early in the season, it's about territory. 95% of all birds, only the males sing. All right, only males sing. And so males are proclaiming their territory. This is my place, this is my place, this is my place. I'm going to go over there, this is my place, this is my place. All right? And they're also conveying another thing to the other males. I'm big and strong, this is my place, this is my place. Because listen to how much I'm singing. I don't have to go eat. All right? And listen how I can belt it out all morning. All right? So it shows his fitness. And that's a very important thing, especially when the females come in later. But it also works out territorial because they can hear this and they go, oh, okay, all right, that's your place. Right? But if you kind of sound weak and you know you're stronger, they'll come in and take your place, especially if it has more food. So they're always working this out. Then later in the season, as the females come in, same thing with owls, same thing with songbirds, females come in, and then it's all, okay, I still have some energy. This is my place, this is my place, do you like me? Right? And they can read that fitness, right? So if an owl is all night moving around, this is something attractive to the female, and she'll take that incredible territory that came with that male, right? If he's something like he's going to be by himself. Little territory. And eating grass. And so there it is. And again, it's really complicated. It has all of this incredible stuff going on in it. We don't have time to get into, but it again is two for the price of one.
Some female birds choose the male according to the quality of the nest they build them, right?
That's right. There certainly are. Yeah. So I'm just talking about kind of the more general song, the ones that are singing. But there are certainly ones that come take like bowerbirds. Bowerbirds are all about that, and many birds, ostriches, things like that. But I'm just talking about the most common since we're in limited time. But very good. Yeah, and there's other besides that too. There's nuptial gifts. Have you seen the nuptial gifts? Owls do that. The female won't mate unless they bring him. I saw this. The bone-eyed male came down. He's trying to mate with the female. His wife, and she wouldn't do it. And so he went and he took a bowl and he went up and he gave it to her and she took it. She turned around and let him mate. And it's called nuptial gift. Right? It's called nuptial gift. Even some insects do that. Females won't mate unless you give them food. Yeah. I did an experiment that night. I trapped a bull and went into a bar. Doesn't work with primates. Oh. So we'll move on for that. I want to make sure we have some time for the field stuff. Give us another, so we have another, I think, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Is that about right?
20.
20? Cool. Good. Oh. Okay. So, again, amazing things. And what I'm trying to do here is just point out some of the most amazing things there, and at the same time talk a little bit about how they do it so that we're not too bogged down with detail in one day. Did you raise it?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just checking. A very sensitive thing. My eyes. Yeah. We used to think before a few years ago that the Arctic tern had the longest migration, where it would go from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back in a year, around the world in a year, which is amazing for a little bird, right? But we now know that the Sooty shearwaters, with some of the technology they've been using with satellite technology, 40,000 miles a year. That is, again, really incredible. That is just amazing that they can do this, and they're doing different things at different times to be able to get food, to be able to make that up. Some of them, of course, are kind of, checking other areas. How do they do it? And it turns out there is no one answer for bird migration and how they do it. They do it. Many birds do it in different ways. So let's talk a little bit about how they can navigate, how they know when it's time. How do they know how far to go? How do they know where to stop to get food? It's really quite an amazing thing. And again, we could easily have 2 hours just on this subject, just to scratch the subject. So this is now the winning bird. And again, it's out there with not a lot of cues, right? It's out there in the middle of the ocean. So it's not like it's following a ridge where it's like, oh, all I got to do is make it to that mountain range or something like that, right? Really quite amazing what's going on at Earth. So we don't have time to go over all of it, but let me share with you some of some of the most common here, or some of the most useful for us. Pigeons, homing. We know how they have incredible homing ability, right? Well, it turns out relatively recently, we've been able to find out that they have little magnetite particles that are very small in their bill, and their nervous system is able to react to the orientation of the magnetite. So they literally have little mini compasses that are in their bills, and this gives them information and they can veer accordingly. And that information, of course, is kept in their brains in an instinctual way so they know how to get from one place back to another, and we call that homing, when you come back to the same place. And all birds that migrate use this to a certain degree, but might not necessarily be magnetite in the bill. It could be in the head, or it could be all kinds of other cues that are out there. But it is important for us to all make sure we're on the same page with the term migration, because that's often misused. Migration means you come back. It doesn't mean just going somewhere. It means you go somewhere, hang out, do something there, and then come back in the same place. And so there's some terminology that's useful for you, I think, in understanding birds. You're going to hear people talk about birds as residents, for instance, right? They don't migrate. You might hear the term winter residents, breeding, summer residents. And so when you look at your bird books, you're going to see maps that have certain colors. I highly recommend learning those colors so that you know where your birds are at certain times. Now, birders know what are coming in right now. Your favorite little golden crowned sparrows that have those beautiful songs, and the white crowned sparrows that are now coming in this time of the year when they start coming in from the north when they were breeding, right? Birders know when they leave, birds know when they come back, and that's all worked out in your little maps in the bird books. This all has to do with being able to partition resources. The birds fly north for food because, of course, there's more light in the summertime. Photoperiodism, I should say, within a 24-hour period, we call that seasonality, and so they then exploit all of that, all right? And then they're able to spread out and not compete as much. And so we know why birds fly north for the summer. Yeah. So these are just some of the ways in which birds are able to orient themselves and navigate as they move throughout the planet. This is disconcerting because it turns out a lot of these are dependent on a stable climate, and so we know that a lot of birds are in trouble right now because they're using, they've been using certain cues for, you know, tens of thousands of years, and that's changing drastically within a relatively short amount of time. Scientists don't really have an idea of the degree this is going to affect birds, but we do know, of course, it's going to affect birds. Everything on the planet is being affected right now by very fast climate change. And a big part about climate change is not necessarily the warming to ecosystems, or it's really the relative fast instability. That's what's difficult for ecosystems. That's what's difficult for poor people. That's what's difficult for the world. Sun compass, star compass, almost all the passerines, they fly at night. And so they're able to follow certain stars. That will probably always stay consistent, so they'll be okay. Yeah. You know, there's certain stars that move a certain way, so they have a star map in their head. And you know how they figured this out? They put them in places where you sit back and look at them. And they put them in there and they moved the stars and they watched what they did. All kinds of cool stuff. Yeah.
Is that following the stars, is that connected with magnetism somehow?
Well, I'm sorry, one more time?
They're following stars, that's sort of magnetic frequencies, isn't it?
No, they're following the stars using vision.
Okay.
Yeah, the very light, yeah. So they have a mental map of what they should be following, and so if they veer off, it doesn't match the mental map, they come back and that's how they stay. And they'll do that also with odor. Some birds, especially the ones that are out in the ocean, they do it with odor because of different kinds of plankton that are in different areas put off different kinds of gases, and they can follow that, and that's pretty consistent because of the temperatures. Geomorphological, some birds will follow mountain ranges, or will follow the edges of deserts, or will follow the perimeters of a forest or something like that. It's all mapped into their heads. Some of them can use, and like the birds that have to fly across the Gulf, they'll fly at certain times because it's worked into their evolutionary past that they want to be flying when the wind pushes them, not when it's going against them. These are some of the things that are changing now. Winds and pressure systems are changing around the world very quickly. And so, of course, many birds are going to be affected by that. And it's all activated by photoperiodism. And photoperiodism is the amount of light within a day. So within a 24-hour period, and how that changes. That's why your chickens aren't laying eggs in December unless you put a light up in there, right? Yeah, that's all about photoperiod. You put a light in there, that artificially they'll lay eggs. That artificial light, they'll lay eggs all year. Okay, so you get a sense of that. Again, there's a lot there. You'll have this all available, so you can take a closer look at some of these details if we want to investigate some of this. This is an area of active research. There's a lot of work being done on migration. I've seen a lot of papers come up almost a few times a year that are just, whoa, I had no idea that was happening, kind of stuff. This is all being worked out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about birds in the field. Developing a kind of a field perspective, and this is one of the things that I thought was important before we go out there, is to have this part especially. Yeah, and so I'm going to put this bird out here because I think our natural tendency for experiencing or identifying birds in nature is this bird had a black back and it had an orange belly and it had this certain kind of color on a certain area, right? And this does take a while to learn. You really have to kind of spend a lot of time. And okay, what are the coverts? And this is a very simple one, but you've got all these upper and lower wing coverts. You've got the primaries and the secondaries. You've got all these different parts and their relative sizes with each other. I would recommend using that later. I would recommend trying to learn birds, if you're just learning them, on a more holistic way and how they interact with their environment. That will be faster and it will help you a lot later on. And so I'm going to give you some examples. Don't not do this, but I would make it, I recommend to my ornithology students to make it secondary. And I'll show you some other areas that might be helpful. So for instance, the silhouette of the bill. This tells you a lot about their habitat. All right? I think most of you know that this is for tearing flesh, gathering nectar, filtering plankton, grasping fish or rodents, eating fruit, a chisel, a probe, forceps, seed crackers, different sizes, fish catchers. And for every one of these groups, we've got probably 100 birds that have variations on that. Right? And you've got all kinds of things like spoonbills and again, many variations on this. This is a buteo, but a falcon has a little notch here. You can always tell a falcon because they have a little notchal tooth, a little notch there, and that's used to sever the spinal cord because they eat really big things sometimes and they've got to be able to contain it, so they have to kill it quickly. Yeah, the buteo doesn't kill it that way. It just uses its talons to hopefully pierce its heart and its lungs. And you watch them when they kill her, kind of a thing, right? What's that? And so anyway, all kinds of variations on this, especially for the insect eaters and especially for the seed eaters. And that's a big part of biology. It's demonstrated by a principle that he calls the principle of competitive exclusion. And that's to state that no two species can occupy the same niche. The principle of competitive exclusion. And this is what is responsible for resource partitioning. And it's a wonderful filter to use when you're out there in nature because a lot of that diversity has to do with organisms' ability to partition resources. You see it right there. And it's not just fruit and rodents and plankton. It's all kinds of different fruit and different kinds of rodents and different kinds of insects within each one of these. These are just major groups. So I talk about this when we talk about ecology and biology, but if we understand resource partitioning, it allows us to understand all kinds of other things. It's a really useful way to look at things. The principle of competitive exclusion. No two species can occupy the same niche. And we can see their niche, their role that they have in nature, by looking at their bill. That gives us a big part of that, of what they're doing. And of course their feet too, all right? And some birds of course have webbing, some have partial webbing, some are used for perching. A really cool thing about this that I think is that they have a tendon, they have a tendon that when weight pulls on the tendon, it closes the foot. And so they are not grasping when they're sitting there. They're completely relaxed. It's the weight of their body that pulls them on. So that's how they can sit there and sleep, which is kind of cool. So if you had a little bird foot, you could pull that tendon and it would just close the foot. Those are called perching birds, the most diverse group of birds in our region. All those songbirds out there, crows are all perching birds. What about if the bird wants to move around on land, like a lark, or they live out in grasslands? You have horned larks around here, right? What kind of a foot do you need for that? Or what about if you want to scratch into the ground because you feed at the ground, like a chicken or a quail or a pheasant? And we could, again, spend all day just on feet. Yes.
Now, you could talk about the bones of mammals corresponding to birds, but all of them have 4 digits, whereas we have 5.
Yeah, that's right. And so their thumb is the hallux here, and then it goes around clockwise, and so they don't have pinkies.
There is a breed of chicken, the silkies, that have 5.
Okay, but obviously most don't.
Yeah. Your chickens have 5?
One of them does.
Oh, one. Whoa, I missed that. I thought you just said chickens.
No, I said there is a breed.
Yeah, domestic animals don't count. But yeah, sure, some individuals maybe. You know, a lot of this has to do with decreasing drag and all kinds of stuff. So, be aware of that. Most of the birds you're going to see are going to be perching birds, but as you kind of spread out there, this I think is one of the most useful ones for you. Because, have you ever been with a birder and they see like something way there's like a little dot and they're like, yeah, that's a white-breasted blah, 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 blah. And you're like, how the hell did you know that? That's why. Because you can see that from far away. And that is actually a great way to enter their world. And there's all kinds of wonderful things. For instance, this white-breasted nuthatch, it can go down, but this one can only go up. Resource partitioning. And it has a special little strut in its legs, so it can use its legs to go down. Most things can't go down a trunk. Very difficult, this weird thing, gravity. These guys have to go up, both of them, and then they use their tails to use for support. They have special 2 and 2 kinds of toes. Look at that, this zygodactyl, 2 and 2 here, right? And then of course, look at these guys are just waiting to look out here. So this is really important. Identifying birds based on their behavior and their habitat and how they're moving around not only allows us to identify them and know what group they belong to, but it also gives us insight into their biology. I would start with that. If somebody said there's only one thing I can concentrate on to learn birds, I would do that one. Because that one will give you most bang for your buck. Postures are really, just notice that. When you see a bird, notice posture. What is it doing? Say it to your friend. Say it to them. Do you notice that bird's kind of slightly down? Do you notice that bird's straight up? Do you notice that bird has a diagonal angle, right? Do you notice that bird's hopping and it's straight, or the other one's hopping and it's more reclined? Yeah, and so people can tell a warbler from a vireo from a least flycatcher, which are major groups that are in your little bird book, by just the position that they do when they're perched. And so if you pay attention to that, you'll really get a lot more out of this, being to share that, because there's so much more there as well, and it'll be easier to do what we call birding, which is the challenge of figuring out what damn species that is, right? Yeah. How about all these silhouettes, right? Getting to know the silhouettes. There's that nuthatch because it's going down. There's a woodpecker going up. A screech owl because it has ear tufts. A Steller's jay because it's a noisy, and it has a crest, right? A mockingbird, a starling, a kingfisher, a robin. All of these birds have particular silhouettes. The old Peterson guide had them in there, and it's too bad that they don't have them in the more popular books that they have now. So pay attention to those silhouettes. That's one way those expert birders are seeing things from far away. They can see a particular silhouette that has just maybe one difference that would never be found on any other kind of bird. And also, it's a detective game. You're combining clues. It's sitting up like that, and it's pointing down, and it's doing this. That must only be expert. All right, so it's kind of a detective game. Flight patterns. Finches and woodpeckers, they have heavy heads, and so they sink down and flutter, flutter, flutter up, and sink down and flutter, flutter, flutter up, sink down, flutter, flutter up. You see this from far away? You can see this from a quarter mile away. I'm going to wrap it up here pretty soon. Here. And if you really start getting into it, you'll find that there are certain birds that look a lot alike, probably found in different habitats, but that's not hard to remember. And so you can use ratios of size parts. For instance, the downy woodpecker has a bill length, you can get 2 of them in his head, and the hairy woodpecker, you can only get about 1. So do a lot of that, and you can compare. Oh, okay, I use that quite a bit. It's a lot easier than remembering, okay, it has 3 white dots on a particular feather or something like that. This works from far away. So this was on the list that was given to me. I think I covered everything that was asked and some more, but we can kind of summarize this. All birds have feathers. All birds have mandibles. We call this a mandible and a maxilla. And the thing about the bill of a bird, have you ever noticed they can eat big things? Well, you have kinesis in your lower, but your upper one is stuck, isn't it? Not theirs. They have mandibular kinesis. And so their upper bill is on a hinge and their lower bill, so they can open up a lot wider. So that's how an owl can get like a rabbit down its throat. Yeah, amazing. And they're all endotherms, so that means they produce their own heat rather than like a reptile. They all lay eggs, all of them. There are no birds that fly around with babies hanging out of their uterus. No birds have teeth, no birds have hair, and birds live everywhere. I didn't notice that rhyme until I actually went there. So I'm going to just start to wrap up here. I should start wrapping up, right? 5 more minutes, Bob? Is that okay? Yeah. One of the things that I was asked to talk a little bit about is the connection between reptiles and birds. And here's a kind of an in-between reptile. Notice it has a tail. Birds don't have a tail. They have only feathers that come out of a little pegostyle, just a little vestige of a tail, right? Look at this. The sternum doesn't have a keel. This one has a keel, and that's for a breast, for the downstroke. That's all for the downstroke. These have teeth and a very heavy skull. This has a very light skull and no teeth. All right, and then you can see in the pre-bird, Archaeopteryx is kind of the link between birds and reptiles. You can also see that a lot of the bones are still separated out, whereas in modern birds they're all fused. Birds and reptiles, birds and crocodilians and dinosaurs are all in the same group. So birds are technically reptiles. We separate them out for reasons beyond what we can talk about here. But a bird and a reptile, a bird really is a dinosaur. It is the same group. Yeah. And so birds, the term birds is an artificial term. They're really just flying reptiles. And the scientists now agree on that. And then the one thing I was asked to talk a little bit about acorn woodpecker. That's a good thing to get your kids to do. Just do that with them and they'll all go. The acorn woodpeckers are cool, man. So acorn woodpeckers are unusual birds in many ways. They're unusual birds with their food, they're unusual birds with their movement patterns, and they're especially unusual birds with their sexual systems. And as you probably know, all of the Melanocnes, this is a particular genus of woodpeckers, store acorns. They do a lot of them. The Lewis's woodpecker belongs to this group among a couple of others. And they all store acorns, so do jays. They're not the only birds, but they do it in these big granaries. And they do it probably so that they can dry, because they have to, once they put them in there, they have to manage them because they shrink and they can be taken out by other critters, so they have to move them around, and they're doing that all winter rather than eating insects. They eat mostly insects, right? But they store the acorn for the winter time, so this allows them to live in cold regions because insects don't fly around when it's cold, right? And so that's the way they have to migrate. So this is a kind of a behavior rather than migrating. And they're very expressive. The males have red, they go all the way down the top of the head, and they move this up and down. They're always talking to each other, watch them up there. All this stuff's going on. So they're very complicated in their behavior. And that's because they're, you're familiar with the term amorous? They're polyamorous. Yeah, they take a liking to many of their mates. They have these females, yeah, and males, And typically, you'll have something to, within a colony, you'll have a ratio of maybe 1 female or 2 females that's nesting, and up to maybe 14 or 15 males. And the older males will be sharing the 1 or 2 females. This is unusual. You don't see this in birds. You don't see this in birds. They're mostly monogamous. These are all colonial. And then it turns out that they lay so many eggs because of that, that mostly aunts, or it could be in bigger colonies, mothers from past, right, so grandmas, right, help raise the young. Again, you don't see this in birds. Maybe pygmy nuthatches to a certain degree. They're very complicated colonial systems. They also have a tongue, and you can do this with the kids. A woodpecker's tongue comes through the mouth, comes up around the ears, comes up here, and it attaches above the eyes. And so that gives it a lot of strength. It can get in to all those areas that it needs to get into. Do you see that here? And then this hyoid bone is what allows it. It lies in here, and it allows it to do that. So if we had more time, we could talk a lot more about these. You can look up acorn woodpecker and find all kinds of cool things. They have specialized skulls so that they can pound their skulls into wood. And also they have filters. Do you ever notice that? All woodpeckers have little mustaches above here. So when they're breathing, all this dust that's flying around, it doesn't go into their lungs. Well, a whole long list of really cool woodpecker stuff out there. Again, we can do a whole day on woodpeckers. So that's the visual I would like to leave you with. That's where we're going, all right? Perspective is so important. We think we're up here, but the biologists and the scientists and everybody who's taken a good look at it see that we're all in this together. And once we start thinking of that as a species, in my opinion, that will allow us to be sustainable. So, can you see a mouse a mile away? Can you extract 90% of the oxygen from the air? Strut your structural feathers, remain where you hit 1,000 nuts, sing 2 songs, pee and poo out of the same exit? I didn't think so.